Welcome to tonight's panel regarding sexual violence at Luther College. My name is Janet Hunter, and I'm the Director of Case Management in the Student Life Office at Luther. And I also serve as one of the Title IX Deputy Coordinators. Tonight's panel is sponsored by the Center for Ethics and Public Engagement. The center's purpose is to facilitate dialogue and understanding about responsible citizenship and the most pressing ethical issues of our time. Joining me this evening, we have Andy Eastwood. If Andy can do a quick wave out. He is a social work faculty member here at Luther College. And then we also have Brittany McIntyre. And she is an advocate from Helping Services. And this is a community agency that supports survivors of domestic dating violence and stalking. We've got Kasey Nikkel, who is our Luther Title IX coordinator. Jessica Rupp, who is the Luther Health Education and Promotion Coordinator. And then Sarah Wennes, who is a sexual assault advocate from Riverview Center. And this is a community agency supporting survivors of sexual assault. So following our panelists' presentations will be a Q&A session. So please feel free to submit your questions at any point during the presentation using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Your questions will not be visible to other viewers, and you have the option of submitting them anonymously. And at the end of our scheduled time together, the panelists have offered to remain available for further discussion in some breakout rooms. And we'll talk more about that at the end of our program. Tonight's program will touch on some sensitive information, such as sexual misconduct. So we'll be spending about 60 minutes together with the opportunity for about additional 30-minute discussion in a breakout room. We'll talk about definitions, incident trends, and resources for yourself or how to help a friend. We know that you are resilient, and we know that you are aware of what you need to do in order to take care of yourself during this presentation, such as deep breathing, laying your head down, or getting a cold drink. Before we continue, I'd like to highlight just a few additional resources. I'm going to make sure that screen's up before we go. So I want to highlight there's a difference. We have private resources and then we have confidential resources. And so private resources mean that we are going to keep things really close to our chest, and we're just going to make sure that we can help you and offer as many resources as possible, support as possible. And then our confidential resources are those who cannot share with anybody. They cannot share with Luther College officials. They can't share with parents, friends. They will not share with anybody unless you give them the permission to do so. So some of our private resources here on campus is Kasey Nikkel, who's our Title IX coordinator, Luther Safety and Security, the Student Life Office, which is located in the second floor of the Union, and then the Decorah Police Department. And so some of our confidential resources, again, these people cannot share with anybody unless you give consent to. We have our health services here on campus, and they're located behind Larson Hall. The Luther College Counseling Services, which is also located right next door to health services, right behind Larson Hall. Campus Ministries, located in the CFL. And then additional confidential resources that are not on campus are the Wennes Medical Center. They have stain exams that can be performed there. The Riverview Center, Helping Services. And then we also have some national hotlines, and those are all confidential as well. And these will be posted, and if you look at the Title IX website, they're also posted there. And so before we continue, we're going to practice a little deep breathing exercise before we begin. And so as you kind of look at this shape, we're going to breathe in while that shape expands, and then we're going to exhale as that shape gets smaller. And this is used quite often, and I encourage you to use this as frequently as you'd like to throughout the session, but I want to take just 30 seconds here to do this. So we're going to breathe in. And breathe out. We'll do one more. Breathe in. And breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Kasey, I'm going to turn the stage over to you.
Thank you, Janet. So I'm going to talk to you about some recent data from a survey we did at Luther College. Campus climate sexual assault surveys are considered a best practice in higher education to gain insights, the prevalence of sexual assault that occurs on your campus, as well as the attitudes and experiences students have surrounding campus climate. We believe the best way to address a really difficult problem is to have reliable data, and feedback from our students in this survey allows us to track trends and changes that we need to do as an institution. Last April, we administered our second campus climate survey, which was anonymous, through the Higher Education Data Sharing Consortium, also known as HEDS, and that compares Luther's data with 91 peer institutions. You can see we had 453 student respondents to the survey. That was slightly down from 2017. Of those 453, 27% compared to the Luther female population was represented, 17% of the Luther's male population, and we had 9 individuals identified as non-binary participate in the survey as well. And there was no incentive for the survey participation as to be truly anonymous. A little bit more about our respondent demographics. We had good representation from every Luther class. We had slightly higher representation from our female students. Our enrollment for female students is around 57%. And we had good representation from different orientations, race, and ethnicities. When doing a survey, common language is really important to help understand the intended meaning of the survey respondent. And so HEDS uses 2 clear definitions when administering the survey. The first is sexual assault, which includes non-consensual touching of a sexual nature and sexual penetration, and unwanted sexual contact, which includes unwanted verbal behaviors, unwanted nonverbal behaviors, and unwanted brief physical contact. Now, before I break this down a little bit more, I just want to talk about how sexual assault on college campuses has been an issue or a concern for higher education since the mid-'80s. There was the tragic death of Janine Cleary, who was raped and murdered in her residence hall at Lehigh University, and her legacy went on to inspire Cleary Law. And then also in 1987, Mary Koss did the first sexual assault campus climate survey of colleges and institutions that had the prevalence of sexual assault on colleges reaching 1 in 4 or 1 of 5 students during their tenure would experience it. And at Luther, we are not immune to that either, and it continues to be a concern for us on our campus as well. And so the survey from HEDS does ask, have you been sexually assaulted during your time at Luther, with kind of the jurisdiction questions of either on campus, off campus with an event or program connected with Luther, including a study abroad or internship, or at a social activity or party near campus, such as an apartment, restaurant, or bar. You can see 10 of the survey respondents that identified as male did say that they experienced sexual assault during their tenure, and 50 of the students that identified as female had experienced sexual assault during their tenure. It should be noted the non-binary respondents of the survey did not disclose that they were sexually assaulted during their time at Luther, and therefore will not be reflected in some of the additional slides of data. So when we're looking at sexual assault, we want to break that down even more to understand the type of misconduct that took place. You can see an overwhelming amount of the data relates to touching of a sexual nature for both men and women. Some of this data does match reporting given to the college in regard to fondling at large social gatherings or off-campus venues such as a dance floor at a local bar. The second highest categories include vaginal sex for women and oral sex for men. The assailants in the data are often not strangers. Most sexual assaults and rapes are committed by someone the complainant knows. In this most recent survey, our data revealed that over 90% of the assailants were other Luther students. This is relating to where the sexual assault occurred. And you can see we've seen a decrease in our residential halls, but an increase at off-campus apartments, restaurants, bars, or other nearby locations when comparing 2017 to 2020. It should be noted that Luther does not have Greek housing, and so this area in the middle, I'm not sure what the respondents are referencing to, but that is Head's language, not Luther language. And drugs and alcohol are involved in the majority of sexual assaults, either by one or both parties. However, even if an individual is drinking or using drugs, it is not an invitation for non-consensual sexual activity. According to Luther's campus policy, it's not an excuse that the individual respondent of sexual misconduct was intoxicated or using drugs at the time of the assault. Alcohol and drug-related sexual assaults more often occur among college-age students who know each other in a casual way and who spend time together at a party or bar prior to the sexual assault occurring. For more data related to this, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
Thank you, Kasey. This next slide that you're seeing shows data from a different survey that was administered in November of 2019, so prior to students going home for the COVID-19 pandemic. This survey was the American College Health Association's National College Health Assessment. As I said, it was administered in November of 2019. And we had 724 students that responded to that survey for a total response rate of 38.1%. So a little bit higher than Kasey's survey that she mentioned. The data here is looking at to what extent did these experiences affect your academic performance? Only students who reported experiencing either a sexual assault, a physical assault, or sexual harassment were asked this question. And the three categories that the survey allowed for response for was did not affect academic performance, negatively impacted performance in a class, or delayed progress towards a degree. And we know that incidents of sexual violence, physical violence, and sexual harassment can all impact student success at Luther, their sense of belonging, and their sense of community. So for more information about that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Professor Andy Eastwood to share a little more.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Let's get organized here. Okay, as Janet mentioned in her introduction, I'm a member of the social work program faculty. And as I was thinking about tonight's topic, I was reminded of a Paideia webinar on resilient communities. It was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I wondered how the concepts that informed and guided the work of the presenters might apply to tonight's topic. The presenters defined the nature of resilience as an ability to bounce back, to recover from or adapt to misfortunes, to make connections, to seek wisdom, and to reimagine community. The presentation context related to climate, ecological disruptions, and disaster response, each one with its own set of challenges, but all addressing a common formula that involved understanding vulnerability and its relationship to adaptive capacity. A central takeaway for me from that webinar was the question, how do we reduce vulnerability and enhance adaptive capacity? It was clear that the notion of a resilient community involves upstream and downstream work. Quite literally, in the case of one of the examples, the 2016 Upper Iowa flooding disaster, and all the impacts that happen for people who live in Freeport. This was understandably very traumatic for everyone directly affected by the flood, and the experience gave rise to recovery and rebuilding efforts to restore the community and prevent this disaster from happening again. So, tonight we are not talking about a natural disaster or a community united in recovery efforts. This is not to minimize the trauma of such disasters, but at least in my mind, I see important differences. Sexual assault is a private trauma where shame and blame can combine to produce an unspeakable private pain, a pain that may not be visible or apparent, and a trauma that may be hard to declare and difficult to share. In one of my social work classes, I asked students to reverse engineer a community to eliminate a particular social problem. I gave the example of Dan Levy's plot for Schitt's Creek, where the community is intentionally created to be free of homophobia. As you might expect, this was no easy task, and when we tried to contextualize the task to specific behaviors within a particular place, we soon appreciated its complexities. We might ask, how do communities become resilient? Can we reverse engineer to create resilience? Well, this is not a climate change issue. It's not an economic downturn issue, although there are understandably connections to both. These are collective challenges with very real public faces. Sexual assault is a private pain compounded by cultural norms that convey stigma and blame, and may trigger survival responses that may confound and confuse. For a survivor, their safe space is now a place of pain where trauma from sexual assault can be activated by predictable and unpredictable triggers. The world looks different now. They have a traumatic insight into a world that is not a reality show, but where reality has shown itself privately outside the accountable gaze of public space. In many respects, the notion of resilience challenges us. For example, why are survivors asked to become resilient? Why do we make it their responsibility to change in response to sexual assault? In so doing, we inevitably add more weight to an unspeakable burden. I ask myself, is this fair? Is this just? Such questions are especially poignant when the world seems impervious to radical change and sexual assault remains a reality. It seems to me that we should never ask a survivor to become resilient if we ourselves are not engaged in changing the conditions that create, facilitate, and perpetuate the problem. Like the classroom exercise, this is not an easy task. It is not as simple as writing a script for a TV show, but it forces us to rewrite our own scripts. Over the past few years, I've had the privilege to teach a course originally created by my social work colleague, Professor Britt Rhodes. This J-term social work and identity studies course is now titled Evidence-Based Responses to Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. It is typically oversubscribed, and students who register for this class represent a wide spectrum of interests, motivations, and experiences. Our co-panelists, Brittany, Jessica, and Kasey, are regular trainers and presenters in these classes, and students gain certificates in advocacy from the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Every time I teach this course, I learn so much from my colleagues and from our students. My understanding of resilience and recovery deepens. My appreciation of survivorship expands. My implicit biases are challenged, and my script has to change. Whenever I read data or listen to Kasey, Brittany, and Jessica, I realize that in every classroom where I teach and in every communal area of campus, I am among survivors. These statistics mean lived realities, and lived realities across the intersectionalities of gender identity, sexual orientation, race and ethnicity, nationality, and socioeconomic status. I realize too that the experience and trauma associated with sexual assault is not confined to students. Faculty, staff, and administrators may also struggle with the personal experiences of trauma, and like me, have some understanding of the traumatic effects of sexual trauma within our families and communities. When I see a change in a student's demeanor, or maybe they tune out or can't focus or struggle with routines, I wonder what might have happened. What has changed for them? I know there could be a myriad of circumstances that may account for such changes, and I keep an open mind. I remember that this is an important developmental time in their lives as they navigate intimate relationships and so much more. I try to understand behavior through a trauma-informed lens, knowing that some of my students come to college with trauma histories. Some are able to talk about prior traumas, and in so doing place enormous trust in those with whom they share their experience. I realize this may be too difficult for some. Prior victimization is a category for national data collection, but like my colleagues on this panel, I prefer to use the term survivor. Previous traumatic experience means we need to think about upstreaming in a prevention sense. It's really a preventive strategy to change the causal conditions that lead to downstream problems. Of course, if we could simply reverse engineer our way out of misogyny, sexism, and homophobia and create a community that does not need to be resilient in the face of, let's list them, gender-based violence, sexual harassment, sexual assault, stalking, child sexual abuse, date rape, intimate partner violence, and so on, we would have achieved what seems to be an impossible dream. To borrow again from Paideia, we can apply the concept of disruption. We are called to be disruptors to systems that create, reinforce, or fail to reduce vulnerabilities. While work is needed on all fronts and at every point in the stream, I ask, what can we as faculty, staff, and students do to create a safer, more proactive, and yes, more resilient campus community? What would be our goal? What number of sexual assaults would be acceptable? As I ask this last question, I know, of course, we would immediately say none. But I also recognize that we need to measure progress, assess interventions, and be honest about outcomes. I feel sure that the answer to this question for everyone on this webinar tonight is none. So how do we get to none? I've been impressed by two national initiatives that set out to achieve this goal. These examples are related or are at least relatable to tonight's topic. They both start with the word and the explicit goal of zero. The Zero Abuse Project seeks to eliminate the sexual abuse of children, and the Zero Suicide Movement seeks to prevent all suicides. Idealistic? Yes. Achievable? Well, let's examine their common logic. At the heart of these initiatives is the recognition that if we were to design a health and social system in the US where, for example, there were 45,000 deaths by suicide each year, it would look just like the one we already have. The same logic is used in the Zero Abuse Project that seeks to eliminate all sexual abuse of children. Research in places where zero policies and practices are adopted and implemented indicates a significant decrease in rates. So I asked myself, what could change if we were to approach sexual assault on campus in the same way, with the same logic, and with a strategy that is designed to align all of our policies, practices, and protocols in a collaborative commitment to achieve zero sexual assault on campus? A starting point might be to recognize the unique vulnerabilities and resilience of students with prior trauma experiences and the importance of tuning into their self-protective strategies, trying not to misread how they may respond to stresses or triggers, and to support their self-efficacy with appropriate supports. Jessica, Kasey, Janet, and Brittany are all partners in a campus-wide and town-gown collaboration to support students who experience a sexual assault while at Luther. Many services are in place to help those who experience sexual trauma, and this webinar is an important opportunity to hear from students and all members of the campus community, and to continue work to build a place that is both resilient and committed to zero sexual assault. In the Paideia presentation, it was suggested that progress can only be made when there is a balance or alignment between what is central, in this case, let's say Title IX and reporting standards, etc., and local campus and community policies and practices. But I would add a third, the personal. We need to create an environment that ensures the privacy, dignity, safety, and support of those who experience sexual trauma. The choice and consent lost in an assault need to be restored as the community responds with sensitivity, respect, and nurturance. To steal another Paideia presentation concept, and this will be the last one, we might use the term bounce forward, as it may not be accurate to describe recovery as a bounce back. A parallel concept in trauma work is post-traumatic growth. This may be best described as a recovery journey that opens up new adaptive capacities, whereas survivors' resilience grows and builds on their innate strengths. I look forward to working with you towards zero sexual assault. Thank you for your time and attention this evening. I'm handing this back now to Jessica.
Andy, thank you so much for all of that. That was inspired, honestly. And I do want to talk about how we can get to zero and some of the prevention work that can be done on campus and all of our responsibilities in preventing these incidents of violence on our campus. The first thing I want to talk to you about is consent. So this is the role, if you are going to be engaging in any sexual activity, any physical relationships with somebody, this is what you can do yourself within your relationship to create an environment, a consent environment, and model that. I know for me personally, as I was reflecting and preparing for this presentation, consent has played a role in navigating COVID with my family. Are you comfortable hugging somebody that's not in your immediate household? Just asking those questions has really highlighted the importance of consent, just interpersonally. So Luther defines consent as the knowing, voluntary, and clear permission by word or action by all participants to a sexual activity. Since individuals may experience the same interaction in different ways, it is the responsibility of each party to make certain that the other has consented before engaging in the activity. For consent to be valid, there must be clear expression in words or actions that the other individual has consented to that specific activity. So what does this mean? I like to think about the acronym FRIES. Yes, like French fries. F-R-I-E-S. Freely given, that's the F. So was the consent coerced? Is this something that someone wants to do without feeling pressured? Is this person feeling any maybe implicit or explicit pressure, whether by roles that each party plays in the community? So is it freely given? The R is reversible. Consent can be reversed at any time. If somebody is consenting to kissing and it's going really well, at some point they may want to stop, they may want to continue, and it's okay. It can be reversed. Informed, that's the I. So is everyone aware of what's going on? Do they have their faculties about them? As Kasey said, many sexual assaults on our campus do involve substance use. So is the consent informed? Is everyone aware of what is going on around them? Enthusiastic. This is the one that I think is the most fun, right? Is this something that everyone wants to do? Are they excited about, about the interaction that is about to happen? And, that's fun for the receiver as well, the person who's getting the consent, because they know, yes, this person really wants to do this, and it's going to be a more enjoyable experience for everyone involved. And then is it specific? Everyone needs to know what's going on, and that communication has to go back and forth and be specific to the act that's being enjoyed. So that is something that we can all do interpersonally within our own relationships, and not just our sexual romantic relationships, right? It's also, like I said, with our friends, our family, and making sure that we have consent in our touches and in the things that we're sharing with each other. And then the broader community-based practices that I wanted to talk to you about was bystander intervention. And there are 5 steps to bystander intervention. You're going to be blown away. They're so simple. You're going to be like, I know all these steps. I know this. So the first thing to be a successful bystander is to notice the event. Notice the event. So what does that mean? That means being aware as you're walking across campus. If you're at a party, it means taking note of that strange argument that's happening in the corner. It's being aware if your friend maybe seems withdrawn or a student seems a little out of place in class. So just noticing, making an observation. What is going on around me and with my friends and with my students and the people in our community? The second step is to interpret that event as a problem. Now, sometimes this is difficult and people can get hung up on this step. There's a lot of ambiguity that comes with bystander intervention. And if you're unsure, there's some good ways to navigate that. Check in with others around you. Hey, do you think that that's kind of escalated over there, that argument that they're having? Have you noticed something might be off with Jane? And then check in. Try to sort out that ambiguity. Interpret the event as a problem. The third one is to assume responsibility. One of the quotes that I really appreciate that I often use in my bystander intervention trainings is, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So if you are walking past an incident of violence, you're saying that that is okay on our campus. Standard you walk past is the standard you accept. So assume personal responsibility. Say, this is not okay, and this is something that I can do something about this, and I will do something about this. 4, know how to help. And this is another area where a lot of times people get stuck. It's just hard sometimes to know what is the right way to do this. What's safe for me? What's safe for the people involved? How can I help effectively? Especially if I feel like I maybe don't have the skills or the language or know the right thing exactly to say. So there are 3 ways that I would encourage you to explore as ways to intervene. There's the direct way. Hey, those jokes are not funny. We don't talk like that around here. It is not okay to touch people at a party without their consent. Very direct, right? 2, delegate. Sometimes situations are too big. They're too big for us to take on by ourselves. So we need extra help. And sometimes that's bringing in a friend to have a group response. Hey, something's going on. I don't know. This doesn't seem right. How can we as a group address this issue to make it maybe a little bit more safe for us? And then sometimes knowing you have an ally in the room makes it easier to take that personal responsibility and the next step of acting. Sometimes it's something even bigger where you need to call in campus security, or you need help from an RA, or maybe you need medical attention for somebody. Know when to delegate, know when a situation might be too big, and who the resources are to help, which we'll talk about again at the end. Then thirdly, distract. So this is creating space or a pause in the interaction, time for people to separate and to let the situation diffuse. So this could be something like telling a joke. This could be something like saying, hey, someone is in the parking lot looking for you. It's really urgent. I think they maybe hit your car or something, to just make space and get people separated. Could be saying, hey, let's all go get food. Who doesn't want to get a pizza maybe after a night of drinking, So creating space with that distract. And then the 5th thing is to act. So to actually do the action and the intervention. So those 5 steps again were to notice the event, interpret the event as a problem, assume personal responsibility, know how to help in a way that is safe to you and feels comfortable to you. It doesn't always have to be that direct. It can sometimes be just distracting, creating space, diffusing the situation, or even just calling someone else to help, bringing someone else in. I'm noticing these things. What can I do to support my friend? And then acting. And I think that this is the role that we play as community members to make our community safe. Not only can we practice consent in our interpersonal relationships and create a climate of consent, we can also keep each other safe by practicing bystander intervention and being aware of what's going on in our community. And so with that, I would like to hand it over to Sarah Wennes from Riverview Center to talk about how to help a friend.
Thank you, Jessica. Back on the PowerPoint, we have some statistics about who you disclose to. Most often, as you can see, it's close friends. They have roommates, parents, or guardian. It's people that you trust. It's also shown that the individuals that you do decide to disclose to, sometimes it takes a lot to get to that point to be prepared to make a disclosure. So on the next slide, what we'll focus on is how to handle that response when somebody you know comes and discloses to you. Because sometimes you are that, I don't want to say barrier, but you're that person there that can lead to them either going forward with seeking additional help or closing down altogether. So on this slide, we discuss things to say and ways to respond to individuals who do decide to disclose. Helpful things to do is to believe the person. When someone discloses to you, it's not your job to decipher whether or not this actually happened. They came to you to ask for support, to be that ear, to be whatever it is that they need in that particular moment. So listen and be attentive. When you're listening to someone who is disclosing this kind of information to you, you want to make sure that you're listening to hear them and not listening to respond. Be open, honest, and empathetic. Again, we're not there to pass judgment on the situation or decide whether or not you think it's true. This person is disclosing something extremely intimate and personal and extremely traumatic. Another thing that you can offer is help, giving them tools, resources, offering whatever they have indicated that they need in order to make the decision that they feel is most appropriate for them in that particular situation. And then always, like, you can contact Riverview Center or Helping Services depending on the situation. Sexual assault is not just, it doesn't just happen one particular way. Helpful things that you can remember to say are things like, I believe you. I'm sorry that happened to you. It's not your fault. Always letting them know that you are thankful for them sharing that information, even if it is very, very hard and traumatic. And it's a hard thing to say, but it can be, again, that difference between them choosing to move forward with additional support or whatever route they choose for themselves, or not continuing forward. Asking them how you can help, asking them if they're okay. And then again, like that active listening, like, do you need me to listen? Do you need me to do this? Like, asking them how you can help best provide them support. And if it is just listening, just being willing to listen. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brittany from Helping Services.
Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, everything we've talked about as a victim yourself, or if somebody's disclosing to you, that can be a very scary, isolating, confusing time. So it's important that people know that there are resources available. There's people out there where our specific job is to help survivors walk through this process. And I know we touched on resources in the beginning, but I wanted to throw the numbers up there again and just touch on them a little more, just because it is such an important part of the journey of a sexual assault survivor. So if you or someone you know was a victim and you're looking for supports right on campus, again, Luther has 3 confidential resources that can be accessed. Both the Counseling Center and Health Services, again, are located right in Larson, or you can disclose to campus ministries in the CFL. And again, those are confidential. So you can go to these supports, you can ask questions, you can talk about your story. And there's no fear that things are going to be reported to the hearing, Title 19, or to law enforcement. Nothing's going to be disclosed unless you give them consent to do so. If you're looking for supports outside of Luther or in the community as well as your supports at Luther, you can always reach out to Sarah or myself at Helping Services or Riverview. Our job as advocates is just to support you and help you walk through this process, as well as any support you need beyond. So whether that's going to court with you or sitting down and doing safety planning, crisis counseling, anything that's directly or indirectly related to that sexual assault, it's our job to just help you walk through that and be your support person through that. To work with Helping Services or Riverview Center, the only requirement is that you yourself identify as a victim. There's no fees, there's nothing else beyond that. And we are mobile advocates. So that means we can meet you where you're at in your time, whether that's on campus, somewhere in the community, in our office. So we're going to meet you where you're the most comfortable, so that it's as least stressful to the process as possible. Another confidential resource in the community, if the sexual assault is recent, you can report to the Wennes Medical Center and get a free sexual assault nurse examination. And this needs to be done within 72 hours to get evidence collected. And you can get this evidence collected anonymously. So you can go in and get the kit done, but it can be done anonymously, and you can decide down the road if you want to do anything with that kit or make a report to law enforcement. You can also go in beyond that 72-hour mark if you're worried about pregnancy or STDs or needing preventative medication. Anything like that that's medically related to that sexual assault, you can present to the emergency room, and this is all confidential and free of charge. It's not charged to your insurance. It's not charged. There's no bills. It's paid by an outside source. So that's a very, helpful community tool. And then obviously this one goes kind of without saying, but if you're in immediate danger or you have questions about your rights as a survivor, you can always contact the Decorah Police Department as well, and they can help you discuss, what the process would look like if you were to make a legal complaint. And there are other resources out there, but I think I'll stick to those ones for tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, panelists, so much for sharing your very valuable information and your insight. Just a reminder, audience, that we are taking some questions and answers. So if you haven't had a chance to, please go ahead and submit questions in the question answer feature at the bottom of the screen. And as a reminder that these are not seen by others in the audience, and they can be anonymous. And so I'm going to kind of head down to that area where I can see some of the questions coming in. Bear with me. So I am going to start with, we did kind of highlight the resources on campus and how we know if they're confidential or not. So I'm going to skip that one. If I come forward with my sexual assault experience, will there be court proceedings? I'm going to throw that out to either, Brittany or Sarah or Kasey, if either one of you would like to answer that question.
Maybe I'll start from the college perspective, and then the advocates can speak to the legal process, if that's okay. So if a sexual assault is known to a private resource on campus, so knowledge is given to the Title IX office, our first and utmost concern is getting resources and support to that complainant. From that point in time, we are complainant driven, which means we're very victim centered in our approach. And we want to give agency and choice to complainants on how the college will process that report, meaning that there will not be an investigation and or hearing or adjudication process without the consent of the complainant. So once the complainant says, I would like the college to do a formal investigation, I would like to proceed with a formal grievance, at that point in time, the college will institute its formal grievance process. Without that consent of the complainant, the college will be offering interim supportive measures to the complainant. So again, just if or when that individual wants a process at Luther is when we will begin the investigation.
The legal process can be very similar. You don't have to make or file a complaint if you don't want to. Like Brittany had mentioned earlier, you can go to the hospital and have an examination done. You can have the kit submitted anonymously until you choose to move forward, which is when you decide to go and actually file a complaint. And that's when they would take the kit and send it in, have it tested, and go through that whole process. But no, unless you choose to go through that, there won't be any legal proceedings without that initial first step and that initial coming forward and making that report.
Great, thank you. So there's a question out there too about what is Luther doing to make campus safe? And so, Kasey, I'm going to throw this one to you. What are some of the things that Luther is doing? Because I know you've worked with a lot of different departments on campus, and kind of highlight some of those pieces that you're working on.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the framework of safety on campus is built through our campus policy and education surrounding our campus policy. And so we try and get out in front of different various groups, whether that's academic departments, whether that's student athletes, whether that's faculty or staff or new employees of the college, to really inform them of the policy and the community standards of the college as a whole. For the most part, for the past few years, we've been doing a lot of crisis response. And so some of that includes the personal safety of the complainant. And so some interim supportive measures that we will issue sometimes are mutual no contact directives. And those are designed to limit the space between the two parties and really create maximum distance and to kind of set expectations if they're in a class together or live in the same residence hall. If the accused party is not a member of the Luther community, often we'll go forward with something called a no trespass order, which is enforced with local law enforcement. And we take retaliation very seriously. And so if there's a report of any type of retaliation, that will be investigated. And if found responsible, would be sanctioned accordingly, in some cases going before the Luther College Hearing Board, leading to suspension or expulsion. But we're really excited about some of the prevention efforts that we have in the works growing for a safer campus. And so Luther College has partnered with Green Dot, a nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C. that works with bystander training initiatives on college campuses. And our faculty and staff will be the first kind of training session that we do. And that will be May 24th virtually here at Luther. And we're really excited to do some strategic planning on that as we look forward to kind of rolling it out with our student population later in the academic year.
Great questions, everybody. Throwing this out to probably Kasey and also maybe Brittany and Sarah. Just what are we doing to help support survivors of sexual assault? I would love to hear more kind of from Kasey's office and then also Brittany and Sarah.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, again, a report means support. So if the incident occurred in the residence halls, we're a residential campus, and we believe strongly that those spaces should be places where individuals can socialize, that they can study, and that they feel safe. And if that's become an activating space, obviously we want to look at other campus locations so they can kind of have that comfort in their space. We look at campus escorts, if that's a need, to have campus safety and security be around them at that point. We talk about those mutual no contact directives. We talk about referrals to those confidential resources, both on and off campus. So it's not uncommon for me to refer to advocates or counseling service, campus ministries or health service, or case management in the student life office when we're talking about collaboration of care. And then also there's a lot more that we've been expanding upon as far as the classroom goes. And so we want to ensure that people are successful in the classroom, and what kind of accommodations or interim supportive measures would be helpful there to ensure their academic success through a really difficult time.
Yeah, and just to go off of that, I mean, what we can do as community agencies is, it's very similar. We can offer, or we can discuss the pros and cons of maybe getting a civil no contact order, which is similar to the no contact directive on campus, but it's going to be more, it's going to cover the entire community, the entire state. So we can look into those options for them. But it's really goes back to just collaboration between the agencies and the support people on campus, because the more people we can get behind that survivor and supporting them, that's just going to help remind them that they have people on their team. They have people that they can reach out to if they feel like they need those accommodations made, or they need some assistance in some way, shape, or form. And just knowing that you have those people that have your back is going to really help as they progress and move forward. But I think Luther does an amazing job of, taking survivor situations, very seriously, and they bring us in any chance they can get. So I just really appreciate the collaboration that we have with them, and, the things that Luther does for their survivors.
There were some questions about just maybe just wondering about having heard that maybe Luther's not as supportive of survivors, especially when they are maybe involved in situations involving certain populations, whether it's athletics or music or such. And Kasey, do you want to speak to that one a little bit?
Yeah, and so we don't know what we don't know. That's what I'll say. And we do take reports very seriously, again, working hard to get the supports to that complainant. And if the complainant allows us to address behavior, we will go forward with a formal investigation and adjudication process. Now, I will say for athletics, that's an NCAA requirement. And so our student athletes actually do additional educational work around sexual assault prevention. They do an online module every single fall that's required of them. Jessica Rupp and I actually got an hour with each athletic team this fall to talk about bystander training, to talk about policy and procedures at Luther College, and work through some scenarios. And we've had really good engagement from coaching staff to participate in Green Dot. And we feel that overall, it doesn't matter kind of what the affiliations are. Sexual assault happens regardless of race and ethnicity, regardless of orientation, regardless of gender. It impacts all of our students at Luther College. And if not the complainant and the friends supporting that complainant directly, it's a ripple effect through our community. And I think that goes everyone from the survivor to the faculty and staff and the advocates that are trying to remedy that individual moving forward. And so I'm not sure if I answered that question fully, but hopefully got at some of it.
Yeah, I am wondering if you would highlight the survivor-centered approach a little bit more, how we have a survivor-centered approach for our conduct or our process.
Right. So sometimes I hear, to the Title IX office, why aren't you doing something? You obviously know about so-and-so and their behavior, or labeling a certain group of individuals on campus. And my answer to that is always, we're complainant driven, which means it's not the college's choice to move forward. It's best practice to be victim centered. So when the complainant is ready, on their terms, on their choice, on their agency, at that point in time, if they express they want to go forward with a formal grievance process, the college will support them in that and initiate the formal grievance process.
Perfect, thanks.
And I just wanted to say, to Kasey's point about Green Dot, we're really hoping to have a cross-section across our whole campus of people that are involved in this training and in the process of bringing it here. So we have people, we have coaches, we have music faculty, we have other faculty, we have staff, everyone that is in a supportive role for students. We want them there. We want them a part of this strategy to reduce violence on our campus. Great.
Andy, I'm going to pick on you now. What suggestions do you have for faculty and staff? For instance, what do you say or do to help support survivors if and when a sexual assault happens throughout the school year, either in or out of the classroom?
Yeah, I think there are a number of questions in this question, really. In terms of things that happen throughout the school year, I'm thinking that what is meant there is it happens at a point in the school year. Something that's happening throughout the school year is very disturbing. But there might be a relationship where that is happening. I think the biggest thing, if the survivor is reporting that to me, I would want to make sure that I respond with empathy, of course, and with flexibility. If the person is in my class, then I try to be as flexible as possible in terms of assignments, working with the student in terms of how might they work towards completing the class. Might find some different ways to do that. Sometimes students, especially in a January class, have felt the need to withdraw from the class or take it incomplete. And then I'll work with them towards completion of that course. But beyond all of that academic stuff is the need to ensure that they are connected to the extent that they need to be with the resources that are on and off campus. So I guess, it means that for faculty, we need to ensure we use the mechanisms appropriately that we have set up at Luther to ensure that someone is connected and that we don't leave them in a vacuum, that we are following up. Now, I might also ask them, is it okay if I check in with you from time to time? Would that be okay? Maybe just an email, just to check in and see how things are going. Or I might ask, would they let me know if these referrals are working out? If I suggest, there's this support service on campus, there's this off campus. If I make those suggestions, would it be helpful to them if I checked in with them to see how those are going for you at some point? Again, I think consent is important, but I would not want to miss an opportunity to connect.
Great.
If that's helpful.
Thanks, Andy. I've got one more question and then we'll wrap up. My last question is, so from a peer who would like to be a good friend and a resource for friend, but when they tell me things, it weighs really heavy on my mind. Any advice that we can give this peer as they're supporting their friend?
With this one, we rely heavily on self-care and doing things for yourself that can help with getting you through that emotionally taxing situation. Like being able to provide a support to your friend is such an important thing that you also have to take that time to take care of yourself so that you are able to listen and provide support and feedback, and however that person is needing help. And self-care comes in a variety of different things, from just eating food that you really like to taking time to turn off your electronics, go outside, watch a movie, read a book. Like, just making sure that you're taking care of yourself can do so much when you are listening to people who have experienced trauma.
I'd add one thing to that too. It looks like Brittany's going to jump in as well. I just want to say to this friend, I think instinct is a really powerful tool. And so if you think, kind of as Jess was saying, like it's outside of your realm, that to know bringing in other individuals can just kind of help the situation. And I think your friend will understand, because the worst of it is to know that you care enough about them to seek out additional help. And of course, we always want you to seek out additional help if you're concerned for someone's physical safety. That's always the time that you kind of need to go above and beyond that agreement you had with your friend and tell a college official.
And that was very similar to the road I was going to take, is making, we keep talking about these resources that are available to the victims, but, there's resources that are available, to people that are struggling as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but I believe Riverview does offer secondary victim advocacy. So that if you want to speak with an advocate or a therapist, you can have that confidential resource, or the counseling center is available, to you as well. So there are options for you as the friend that's also struggling out there that you could tap into as well.
No, that was a good point. Like, you can also seek, I've had a handful of people over the years of doing this that have come out because someone else has disclosed to them and they need that additional support because they don't know how to process it.
Perfect. I am going to wrap us up now, folks. And we do have in the chat feature, we do have some breakout rooms. If anyone would like to visit with any of us for the next 30 minutes, will be available. If that does not feel comfortable to you, feel free to contact Kasey or Jessica or Brittany or Sarah or myself or Andy. We would love to take questions at any point in time. I was going to do one last breathing exercise, but I know that time is kind of running short. So just take care of yourself. Remember to breathe. Remember that take care of yourself. And I just want to say how very grateful I am that you have spent the last hour with us. Thank you for your attention to this very important topic. Thank you for the support that you give your peers, survivors of sexual misconduct. Thank you for the continued conversation to end sexual violence. With that, I also want to say a big thank you to the panelists tonight. And please feel free to enter a breakout session, and have a great evening. Thank you.